See it hanging, you? Can you? See any better there?
Yeah, well, now you're not in the picture that well. Yeah,
It's all
I
good.
guess if you squint.
Still can't see nothing though.
Well, we can't see because that's wide open.
Oh, I'm
That's
gonna
not
fix-
usually open.
I'm gonna fix that quickly.
We got lots of natural light today.
Say hi if anybody comes up.
Oh, we got a few viewers.
Do we?
Yeah. I don't say that.
Okay,
helps.
any better?
It doesn't help me any, but anyways.
Oh.
It's because the issue is that window there, which is always the issue.
Hi, Ivy. When you're there, say hello. Which window? That one, yeah.
The door, the main door.
Yeah. When you're there, say hello. If you watch the replay, let us know you watch the replay. Hello and welcome to Coffee Time with
Melissa.
and Kevin. Today we're going to talk about how to measure progress, or the best, or things to think about when you're measuring progress. Maybe it's the best way to word it.
Sure. And the pitfalls of
Only focusing on one thing.
measuring progress.
And some of the pitfalls of just, well, I don't necessarily know measuring progress is a pitfall, but I think some of the mindsets that it can create. Yeah. Hey, Sheila. Chantel. Okay. What time is it? We still have a couple minutes. If you're there, say hello. Say hi to us. If you watch the replay, let us know you watched the replay. So, program sold out. Then I opened up 5 more spots. Then those 5 spots sold, and then yesterday I had somebody message me who had to, for some medical circumstances, she wanted to move into the November group instead. So I still have 1 spot as of right now. Technically speaking, if I decided to go to 50, we could have 6 more spots, but 1 more spot for sure. I also have over 30 people on my wait list right now for, for November, and that program will open in October. The wait list will get first access, just the same as all my other programs, so just be mindful of that if it's something you're thinking of. Hey Janice, so we are going to talk about progress today, or how to measure it, or how not to measure it, or things not to focus on. Things that people get too focused and dwell too much on, maybe?
I think one of the biggest things with progress, and when some people get into either our program or any program, when they don't necessarily comprehend, whether that's not reading all the instructions or not fully participating in orientation week or something like that, when they think about how the program is supposed to work, and you initially ask for, like measurements or pictures or, weight, things like that. Some people really struggle with providing that information.
Well, I think that's a natural. That's a natural though. What do I want to say? It's a natural feeling to be hesitant, to want, in the beginning especially, to want to give somebody pictures of you when you're not really comfortable in your own skin.
Right.
And when, those things are just hard sometimes.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I always tell people that unless it's a specific circumstances and we've had a conversation around it, you're going to be glad that you took the pictures when you take them later down the road, because it's a really, really, all methods of tracking progress in those kind of ways have their place, but pictures specifically can be one of those things that you'll be happy you took down the road.
Right. So one of the things that we're learning through our adventure here with this is that some people have a really varying degree of what they think success should be, or how they should be able to achieve that success. And the biggest thing that, like I said, that we're learning is that there are a lot of people afraid of not being successful. So
Fear of failure is a huge...
Right. So in that context, They could also be very, very scared of taking pictures, of measuring, of weighing, and those sorts of things, just based on the fact that if they don't have the progress or don't see the progress, you know, they're scared of having to admit that, or having to, you know, get out of their comfort level to achieve that sometimes.
That's true. I think that there's actually, in my experience, there's people who are afraid of who are afraid to fail, but there's oftentimes, after we dig into it, there's just as many people who are afraid of success, who are actually afraid of succeeding because of what it means, what the potential is on their life, what the potential is on their relationships, what the potential, and a lot of times that just stems from, you know, ingrained beliefs and mindsets of what change actually looks like versus what it needs to look like.
Yeah.
But a lot of times there is, you know, a tendency to be afraid of failing as well, because you want this so badly and you're afraid to fail. But then that's also there's a tendency there to have ingrained beliefs, old mindsets, patterns and stuff that show up, and then it's really hard to break through those things. But that's also those old patterns and stuff tend to be comfort zones, as Kevin said.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I'm learning personally, and this is something that we talked about this morning, is when you're talking about mindsets and things like that. I never really thought of this process in the context of somebody who has a disorder, and it's something that seems, you know, fairly simple to do, is, you know, now what we call a trigger. So when you ask somebody for pictures and numbers and things like that, specifically when they're now in a group where that's kind of like a semi-public domain.
Yeah, but nobody is ever.
No. But
no. Let's clarify this before we go on.
Well,
nobody
I was getting to that.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's like a semi-public domain based on the fact that they believe, or that they see that they're in a group. So the first thing that they see now is that there's potential for them to succeed or fail in front of more than just you, right? So, but in the context of your group, that's not necessarily the case. Now you can explain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't force anybody to share any of that publicly. In fact, I don't force anybody to share it, period, if they don't want to.
Exactly.
But I do recommend that, again, with the case of pictures, I often say take the picture, even if you don't want to send it to me, or if you don't want to, you know, share it at all, at least then you have it. You have it for yourself, because down the road, you will wish you had taken it, is my experience with clients and with myself. A lot of people get caught up in sizes and numbers, regardless of whether they're measurements or weights or, you know, pounds, or weight lifted on dumbbells and barbells and all of these things. But at the end of the day, and some of that is important, you know, in terms of depending on what your goal is. But at the end of the day, the main goal is to have you feel your best mentally and physically through your process, whatever your goal is. You know, whether your goal is fat loss, whether your goal is muscle gain, whether your goal is, you know, just health and longevity overall. At the end of the day, all of these goals, muscle gain, fat loss, whatever, they all end up with the overarching goal of health, longevity, feeling better, you know, being able to live your life as pain-free as possible, being able to walk up the stairs without being winded, being able to play with your grandkids or kids without being, you know, tired or winded, and being able to be mobile and walk around, you know, without, you know, significant pain in your joints and those kind of things as you age. I think that ultimately is the overarching goal for everybody. It's just we tend to focus so much on aesthetics that oftentimes we lose sight of those things. Yeah. In addition to that, though, the title of this video was, you know, measurements of progress, or how to measure, you know, why we use measurements of progress or whatever. And there are numerous things that progress can be measured by. It doesn't even have to be all about numbers and sizes. Are you sleeping better? Is your energy, do you have more energy? Is your relationship with food improving? Is your mindset improving? Do you have more of a growth mindset? Do you talk to yourself better? can you navigate some of life's circumstances that might have been like extremely negative, or where you would have had more of a fixed mindset at one time with more of a growth mindset now? Have you developed more self-awareness? Do you understand yourself better? Do you have more self-confidence? Is your self-esteem improving? Is your body image improving? You know, measurements and pictures and, you know, weighing yourself on the scale. Yeah, they're all great. They all need to be used for fat loss to a certain extent. But it's not just about using them for fat loss or for whatever goal whatever goal you have. It's also about developing mindsets around these things so that the numbers don't control you, so that you don't measure your worth and your value based on
those numbers,
measurements and weight and, you know, pictures of yourself. You're valuing your worth based on how you feel, based on your health, based on the person you are, based on, you know, all of those things, but not on, you know, losing 20 pounds and I just had a coaching call with my Badass Tribe clients, and one of the things we talked about is that your leanest body is most often not your healthiest body. So, you know, you can be as lean as you want, and a lot of people are walking around really, really lean, but that does not make them healthy. That doesn't mean they feel great or any of those things. I've been in that situation myself. So, you know, when you're in fat loss, and it is important when you're looking for fat loss and when you're trying to achieve a goal like fat loss, that you do have pictures, measurements, and stuff like that, and but not only that you do them necessarily, or that you're forced to do them. If it affects your mental health, step away from it altogether.
Right.
But in the meantime, when you step away from it, when you're a client of mine, what I'm trying to help you do is develop better mindsets around those things, where your worth is no longer, or they don't affect you in an emotional way or a mental capacity anymore like they did when you started with me. So now what I'm trying to do is help you get educated enough whereby the number on the scale doesn't affect you nearly as much anymore, because you understand that it fluctuates on a daily basis. Right. And the majority of the fluctuations are based on water and glycogen. They're not based on fat. They're not fat gain or anything like that. Yeah. And the same thing with measurements, technically, and with photos too. You know, there's a lot more than just looking at it and going, oh yeah, well, she lost 20 pounds or she lost 50 pounds. There's a lot of differences. One person can look at themselves, you know, say prior to starting coaching, and then look at a picture that they're using to compare. And it's not even about the picture and the physical differences. It's about, this is what I remember feeling, what I felt like in this picture, and this is now I know what I feel like in this picture. Right. And it's the mental changes that nobody can see, but the client can see it. The client can see the differences. And for me, I've gone through this process with them, so I can tell the differences. And while that might, you know, you as somebody looking at the picture wouldn't be able to see that, but they can see it, and that's huge too.
Yeah, and I think before anybody can take that transformative journey, they have to really comprehend what progress means. And I think the biggest step in progress is the mindset. And the biggest thing that you look at when you talk to a potential client is just exactly what their mindset is around their journey at that moment. Mm-hmm. That way you can get a better understanding of what they know and don't know about what the journey needs to be. And when you get people that have issues, eating disorders, you know, they've felt ashamed of their body, you know, basically their whole life. Those are the type of people that have typically had a very, very poor relationship with food, and because they've had a very poor relationship with food, they've only been doing like a diet mentality. So all they really focus on is the fact that, oh, I got to be on the treadmill for 4 or 5 hours a day, and I can only eat this amount of food and this type of food. So those sorts of things also derail progress, because their mindset isn't around all the other things that you've just talked about that contribute to that progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, progress is definitely, I would say, it's more mental than physical. Mm-hmm. I always tell everybody, this is one of my famous sayings: change happens from the inside out, not the other way around. So physical progress comes from what happens on the inside to you. So, mentally, I mean, like changes in mindset and stuff, because the more education you have and the more you understand how things actually do work, you understand that things like, restrictive diets and strict meal plans and 1,200 calorie deficits and, taking away carbohydrates and, detoxes and cleanses and celery juices and, you could go on and on forever.
Right.
That those things, when your journey becomes more focused on and you understand and you get educated, the journey becomes less on let me get fat loss as quick as possible to what does sustainable fat loss look like, because I don't want to lose another 20 pounds only to put 30 back on at some point in time. And the other thing is as Kevin mentioned before, all these things can be triggers for people. Weighing yourself, measuring yourself, taking pictures, that can all be triggers for people. And that's a very valid point, and it's a very valid thing. So it should, in my opinion, those things shouldn't be forced when they're triggers for people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I have those issues with clients, or when that happens with clients of mine, it's more about then helping them develop a different mindset. It's the same thing when you're trying to, say, help somebody navigate emotional eating or binge eating or whatever, or stress eating or whatever, which is kind of all tied into similar things. You're helping them develop a new mentality around food and around exercise and around how to deal with their emotions and help them move forward in that way. So you do the same thing with the progress indicators. You help them navigate and understand and help them build their mental strength so that at some point in time, these triggers, weight and yada yada, no longer triggers them, and they're just points of data.
Right.
Because if you are after fat loss, while you don't necessarily have to track, all of those progress indicators, it becomes at some point in time a little bit important, especially if you're struggling with actually seeing change. Because if you're struggling with seeing change and you don't have any of the progress indicators, you don't really know if change is happening or not,
Right.
unless you can physically see it. And a lot of times with people, especially people who are triggered by numbers and sizes, they actually don't see the physical change on the outside unless it's presented in front of them, where they're looking at it by a picture or the numbers or whatever show the change. Because body dysmorphia is also a real thing. So, but there's a process to get, because if you don't try and work past the process of, I really can't get on the scale, or I really don't want to take pictures of myself, or yada yada, if you don't try and work past those, then you end up at some point in time still being stuck, because you haven't worked on the mindset of what's holding you back here and what's making these things triggers for you. Now, in saying all of that, the process of getting you to a point where you're no longer emotionally attached to a number or a size or whatever, that could take years. I'm not saying that happens in a 6-week period, and I'm certainly not saying it happens even in a few months period. It could literally take years to get there.
Well, I mean, it took years to get there in the first place,
Well, this is true.
right? I mean, basically, the diet mentality has driven people to do that.
Mm-hmm. I'll go through all of those comments and everything after. So there's a lot to unpack for individual people when it comes to progress. Because, for me, I'll use myself as an example. I was obsessed and fixated and, to an extreme, and I mean obsessive, compulsive, with the scale. Morning, noon, and night, weighing myself, yada, yada. And then there was, measurements, and there was pictures, and then there was now I'm obsessed with how much weight I can put on the bar and how much weight I can lift. And, it went from that kind of numbers, shapes, and sizes obsession to then moving into obsession with kind of like weight on the bar and how much can I lift and how strong can I get. And again, there's nothing wrong with either of those things to an extent, as long as your mindset is in a strong place. But when you use the scale and measurements and stuff like that, and you don't understand that your emotions are attached to that, and basically your worth and your value as a person is then attached to a 3-digit number at your feet or what size you are in clothes.
Yeah.
But then you think you've grown, in my case, I thought that I've grown and I've gone past this and I'm no longer attached to the number on the scale, but now I'm obsessed with how much I can lift and how heavy I can make my deadlift and how heavy I can make my squat and how much I can bench press. And those things at one point in my journey became my obsession and my new value and worth. It was like, you know, I can do a 265-pound squat, and I think that's great, and I still love lifting heavy. I'm not saying anything of that, and I think that all that's wonderful, but for me it became just one obsession moved to another obsession, and then eventually you get to where I am now, I'm balanced in both of it, I guess.
Yeah, because realistically, if you're always goal-oriented in your journey, that kind of loses its luster after a while.
I think that in everybody's journey, it starts with, for most people, it starts with an aesthetic goal, and then maybe it moves to something else, and then from that something else, if growth continues to happen, and if mindset growth continues to happen, if you continue to kind of be self-aware and develop more and understanding about yourself, then eventually it becomes more balanced, more free, more understanding, and more actually, like, I don't know, just living.
Yeah.
It's just part
so
of the art.
So how does a scale weight become a thing? Like, how do you, when you look at yourself and you say, okay, well, I want to weigh 170, say for example, where does that number typically come from? Like, how is it that most of your clients derive at the number that they figure they should be?
Most people derive their numbers from a place they were in the past.
Okay.
So most people derive their numbers, scale weight, or maybe even a size jean or an old pair of jeans they have hanging in their closet, or jeans is just an example.
Mm-hmm.
But most people derive all of that from somewhere they were in the past. Like for me, it was always 125 pounds. And it was always 125 pounds because at 125 pounds, I remember being there at one point and fitting into whatever size it was, and I felt good. Then it was 125 pounds when I stepped on stage, and I remember all the work I did, and I remember how fabulous I felt, even though, you know, in both cases, my health wasn't what it is today, you know what I'm saying? And like for a lot of my clients, it was, well, I remember being this size back then, or I remember being this weight back then, and that's generally where it comes from.
Right. So, as we age,
Mm-hmm.
does that number still have value?
I think all numbers can have. What do you mean by value?
Well, like say for example, when they said that, they were 25 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're 50.
I don't think that age dictates what you can and can't achieve, but I do.
Not achieve, but the weight itself.
Yeah, but you can lose 20 pounds at age 50 just as like you can lose 20 pounds at age 25. It might be longer, and it might take longer, and there might be things, but you can still lose it, and you can still be that weight. The problem is not so much that it's going into it with the mindset that I have to do whatever I have to do to get here, not thinking about. We had this conversation just in my tribe call too, where we often get into mindsets where we don't think about the fact that all we think about and all we kind of focus on is that I want to be, say, 125 pounds. But when we actually reflect and think about where we were when we were 125 pounds, in those instances, in my cases, for instance, it was no more healthy than I was at whatever weight I was, 160, when I completely changed my lifestyle. So why do we want to go back there? Only because that was our leanest. Not because we felt great, not because it was healthy for us even, just because that's, for some reason, some number we got stuck in our head that was our leanest and smallest.
Right.
But yes, you can still achieve the weight, but that doesn't mean that weight is right for you any more at 20 than it will be at 50.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I think is important. I mean, I think that progress can be, you can measure progress by how you feel overall, and be honest with yourself, because a lot of times we get into a point where, well, I really, really felt good at 125 pounds when I stepped on stage, but no, I didn't. I used to tell myself that all the time, but no, I didn't. I felt like shit. Let's be honest. I felt like shit. And so you can really, if you're honest with yourself, progress can be indicated by how good you feel, how strong you are. Are you able to do, basic life tasks without pain? How do you sleep? How's your energy? If you want to use progress indicators and your overarching goal is fat loss, are your progress indicators going down? But that doesn't mean they don't go down every day, they don't go down every week. Are they just going down over time? Look at the trends, the trend in the scale, the trend in your measurements, the trend in your pictures or whatever. Is your energy, did I say this already? Mm-hmm. Is your energy better?
No, you usually got to say things 2 or 3 times.
For some people it's, my digestion has improved, or for some people it's, for some people it's, I was able to go on vacation and not feel obsessed over food or anything like that. And I actually enjoyed myself and I practiced my habits and I stayed true to my habits and behaviors. For some people, it's simply showing up for themselves, making promises they can actually keep and showing up for them, because then that instills that feeling of accomplishment, which in turn instills that feeling of self-confidence.
Right. And that in itself is progress.
There's numerous ways.
So, okay, so now we've talked about, what progress is and what it does. Good progress, say good progress, bad progress, depending on where your mindset is at, like indicators. I want to talk a little bit, or push you to talk a little bit now about excuses around progress or lack thereof to derail somebody's journey.
So the first thing I'll say is, here's what I think, based on my experience, even my own personal experience. I don't think people view the things that they say out loud as excuses a lot of times. I don't think that people see that they're saying something and it sounds like an excuse, or that it is an excuse. Like, and I don't mean simple things like I don't have time, or oh no, what's another famous one? Let's just say, I don't mean that. I think everybody know when a lot of times when people say they don't have time, most people know that that's internally, and when they're saying it, that's an excuse. Because a lot of people will say, I don't have time, I know that's an excuse, I know. Usually is what I hear often. But I'm talking about, so as a coach, my basic role with every client is for me to step outside their box and for me to be objective and be able to say, here's what I see, so that, because oftentimes they don't see it. And that's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So there may be things that are going on, patterns, behaviors, habits, that they actually don't see. They don't see because they can't be objective with themselves. They haven't yet developed the full-on self-awareness to be able to point it out. Or simply, as individuals, we're simply not very good at being objective with ourselves. Right. We're not good at, basically, calling ourselves out on our bullshit, basically. So because that's hard, that we don't do that, I don't necessarily think people realize they're giving themselves an excuse, or they're giving themselves an out, I think is what we're trying to get at here. So they don't realize that, so I don't necessarily call it an excuse. I just think that they haven't developed the self-awareness. They don't have the ability to look at themselves and say, oh my, I'm just come up with a whole bunch of bullshit and I need to call myself out on it to change.
Right.
Because technically speaking, and I think I've said this numerous times, your brain is wired to protect you regardless. So even if that means that the things that you're doing don't serve you, your brain is still wired to protect you and do those things. So you have to fight against your brain, your comfort, to change. So if you're doing a bunch of things that you know don't serve you, but you still do them, that's your comfort zone. That's your brain trying to protect you and keep you safe. That doesn't mean that what your brain is doing is good for you, or what your brain is telling you you need to stay is good for you. Now you have to pull back against that to create something new. And that, my friends, is very fucking hard.
Right, because this is what we were talking about earlier, about, taking a picture of yourself. For somebody who has a disorder, or for somebody who just plain out don't like how they look in pictures, that's something that you coach them through, to say, you know, this is part of your journey. Yes, that's fine. This is not something that you share with the world, but this is for yourself. And you teach these people how to use that in a positive and powerful way so that they can get out of that comfort zone. They can see past that wall. They can,
Yes.
and move forward.
But I need to address something though.
Yeah.
There's a difference between somebody who has a disorder and somebody who needs to get out of their comfort zone. So somebody who has a disorder and who is triggered by things, like say for instance, they're triggered so much that they tend to go backwards when they do those things. That's something that we would classify as, I guess, a disorder. And that's where we need to work with those people where they may not be able to take the pictures and the measurements and the weight right away.
Right.
Eventually down the road, with working with somebody, doesn't have to be me, the goal would be to help them navigate these things so that they no longer feel these ways about themselves. And then the pictures, the measurements, and the things can probably be taken. That could be a long time. Somebody who just doesn't like the way they look and doesn't want to take the picture, that's when I coach them through that and help them understand that if you lean into your discomfort here, you only need to take your picture. You don't even need to look at it. Let's just say we don't even look at it. We just put it in the back burner. But the fact that you have it is still progress and it's still taking you out of your comfort zone. That's how I teach those kind of things. It's kind of like looking at it from, this is progress for me because you have to step out of your comfort zone in order to start moving forward. The more times you step out of your comfort zone, the more times you are pushing past your brain safety to develop new mindsets.
Right.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, back to the question about the excuses or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what it was, Nadia.
Well, that was basically you just been talking
Oh,
about
okay.
it.
All right. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it was basically how people tend to use, like you say, they don't see it as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as a perfectly legit reason.
Mm-hmm.
But because you've coached a lot of people through those, you can tell when it's a bullshit excuse. That's what we call it, is a bullshit excuse. Your client don't see it as a bullshit excuse. As far as they're concerned, it's fairly legit. But I think what we're trying to get at here is that somebody who is severely triggered by that and can be affected very negatively by doing that, versus somebody who just don't like it. That's where you come in and say, hey, well, you know, we were doing really good up to this point, and it's bullshit.
I think that there's a point where people need to be pushed to a certain extent, but not pushed so hard that they, go away crying. They need to be pushed to the part where they're just outside of their comfort zone enough to elicit change. And then there's the other hand whereby, things like eating disorders and stuff like they are legit they are legit things, legit medical issues, legit whatever. And those people need to be handled in a very delicate way. That's not to say that these people don't need to be treated in a delicate way too.
No, you don't.
There's just a way to coach. There's a way to. This is where coaching gets to be intends to be very individual,
yes.
Very customized, very. This is what this person's experiencing. This is what this person's experiencing. This is what this person's experiencing. Somebody just asked me on their Badass Tribe coaching call how I recognize patterns in people and how I can manage to do it so quickly, or is it the same for everybody? It's not the same for everybody. I can't pick out the patterns in everybody as quickly as I can for others, but that's because some people are extremely open and tell me a lot of details, and some people are a little bit more closed. Or some people have, different past experiences where they simply avoid being open and have a hard time being open, and others are extremely open and then it's easier to pick out patterns when you know a lot about a person, right? Mm-hmm. But also a lot of my training and my certifications and stuff have helped me with how I coach and with helping me pick out patterns, behaviors, and then helping people navigate those things. So, going back to the progress thing, progress can even be as simple as I did this last week, which was detrimental to my progress, but this week I did this and it was a little bit out of my comfort zone and it was huge for me. Like that can also be progress.
Yeah.
It doesn't, in fact, for me, the majority of time progress is not physical.
Well, that's what I think the purpose of this coffee time today is to get the message that the number on the scale, the tape measure, the photographs aren't the end all to be all when it comes to progress. Like I said, I think the number one progress indicator of progress to start with is getting yourself in the right headspace.
Yeah, I
to
think
prepare yourself for your journey, because
right.
it is a journey. It's not that's why I say it's not just a goal oriented thing. That like you have a 6-week group, but the 6-week group is a course. It's not, hey, I'm coming in 6 weeks and I'm losing 20 pounds.
right.
Right? It's at the end of 6 weeks, I have the habits, I have the tools, I have the knowledge to go and lose that 20 pounds.
Right.
And that 20 pounds might take me 2 weeks, it might take me 10 weeks, it might take me a year.
Mm-hmm.
But you now build a proper headspace around how to take that journey.
So a lot of the progress that I hear about most inside my 6-week program, and there is technically quite a significant physical change in most people in 6 weeks as well in this program, but at the same time, the majority of people coming into the program, and by say even week 3 through 5, they're already talking about how they've had such a mindset shift, how they feel differently about, diet versus lifestyle, how they feel differently about, they know that this is a sustainable process, so it's going to be a little bit longer because they're doing all the right things and implementing all the right things to create habits and behaviors that last forever. Right. And if you sit back and think about it, if you want something to last forever, then you know that it has to take longer than just some 6-day cleanse or whatever. If you want it to last forever, it's going to take 6 months to a year or whatever, because that's the process of long-term change. The process of long-term change is actually digging deeper into so many other things besides just exercise and nutrition. They'll often say things like, I really felt like I got out of my comfort zone through this program, and that I had so many aha moments, and there was so much education delivered, and it was broken down so simple, and it gave me so much knowledge. I never actually had it broken down in that way before. Right. All of that is progress. Exactly. Because you've taken it all in, and now all of a sudden you understand it.
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's and we've talked about this quite a bit before in past coffee times too, is that it could take 90 days or more to even develop a habit. So when you've learned habits or thought processes around fat loss and that journey, typically that's something you've learned over your entire lifespan. And if you're 25, you've learned it over, say, 15 years. And if you're like me, 50, you've learned it at least over 25, possibly right. Even 30 years.
So the other thing that's also a mindset. It's like you're coming in expecting change in, say, 4 weeks with whatever you're going to do, but technically speaking, it's probably taking you 30 years to get where you are. Exactly. So because it's taking you 30 years, it doesn't even make logical sense for you to expect that in 4 weeks it's going to be different. Yeah. You can learn a lot and change mindsets in 4 weeks, but you aren't going to have a significant amount, you aren't going to be where you want to be in 4 weeks. Right. Physically or mentally. There's a lot of stuff that goes, and the process is different for everybody. The journey is different for everybody. The things that somebody struggles with on one hand, this other person over here may not struggle with at all. But this person over here may struggle with extremely different things than this person over here might struggle with. And a lot of the stuff that happens and comes up, we often think, again, it's just nutrition and movement, so I should know this, I should be able to do it, I should whatever. But it's not just nutrition and exercise. It might have to do with these things as to, you may not be showing up consistently for your nutrition or your exercise or whatever, but technically speaking, there's a mindset behind why you're not doing that. Or in some cases, there's also a legit reason, and there's reasons versus excuses, which we've kind of already talked about. Yeah. Reasons are reasons. Your kids are sick, or you're sick, or life has thrown you a curveball and you simply can't do it all. That's fine, but you can still do something, but you can't do it all. Excuses are generally things like I don't have time, or why I can't think of anything else. I have no idea. That's the only one I can think of right now. But those are generally speaking excuses.
Well, that's because, like you say, that's because that's typically an excuse. Whereas what you said earlier is that when they come up with different reasons for why they hadn't done it, as far as in their mind, they're legit reasons. But again, like we keep reiterating, is that in often cases, it's just them not breaking out of their comfort zone. It's just them not
pushing.
not
It's
pushing,
not
not
leaning
taking responsibility for the fact that they didn't make progress.
Yeah, and it's just simply not leaning into the process itself, not leaning into discomfort. Because I always tell people, if you're coming into the 6-week program, you have to be willing to lean into what I have to teach. It is extremely different than most other fat loss programs out there. You have to be willing to lean in and be open-minded to what I have to teach. If you aren't going to do that, then you aren't going to get as much out of it as people who are willing to lean in and, you know, experience what I have to teach, be open-minded to what I have to teach. Yeah. Before I forget, the other thing that I have done with my Badass Tribe clients, these clients in my Badass Tribe are my longer term clients. They're with me for like 3, 6, 12 months or,
Years.
3 years even, some of them. Sometimes what I do with those clients, and sometimes I'll give it to the group as a whole, but oftentimes it's individual. I will ask them not to get on this. I will challenge them not to get on the scale, for instance, at all for 4 weeks. Not one single day. Hide it away. Have your husband put it away. Have your partner put it away. Whatever. Hide it away. Don't step on it. Sometimes that is extremely hard for people. For certain people, that's extremely hard. At other moments, or for other people, I will challenge them to get on the scale every single day at the same time, record it every single day, and watch your fluctuations. Once you watch your fluctuations, that's when you can start to take some emotion away, because if you talk yourself through, obviously I give them other tools, like, make sure you're talking yourself through when you get on and telling yourself that it's just a number, yada, yada. But I do these 2 challenges oftentimes, I don't know when it was, I did the last one, probably a year ago, but I do those things to help develop different mindsets. So some people are completely obsessed with the scale to the way I was, where you're getting on every day, probably even numerous times a day, and you're always berating yourself for the number, and or you're cheering yourself on if the number went down. Other people don't like to get on, period, and can't detach the emotion from the scale, and that's why they don't get on. So I challenge both ways, and I often challenge both ways for, individuals differently throughout their journey. What I'm trying to do is help them build a relationship with themselves that takes their worth outside of the number altogether, that doesn't put their value or their worth on the 3-digit number at their feet, and helps them understand how the fluctuations happen, that they happen every day, and that if you need to eat, and I teach this too, if you need to eat 3,500 calories above maintenance calories to gain a single pound of fat, why are you beating yourself up because the scale went up from one day to the next? Because technically speaking, there's no fucking way last night you ate 3,500 calories over your maintenance calories. So logically speaking, if you look at the number and it went up, it's not fat. If it took you 30 years over time to put on this much fat, no matter how many times you yo-yo diet, it doesn't matter. Lost and gain. But say you put on 30 pounds of fat, what makes you think that 30 days you're going to take it off and keep it off?
Or even know how.
Or know how, even, yes. So a lot of it is diet culture itself is horrendous. It's a terrible, what do I want to say? Like, there's not a lot of, I need to help these people get to a point where they understand everything and can go off on their own and maintain their results. Or I need to help these people understand and be healthy, and their mental and physical health be as important as anything else, so that they can go off and live their lives and be free and feel better about themselves and whatever. Because diet culture is meant to, simple. Diet culture is meant to be continuously needing diets or continuously craving diets. Yeah. There was Atkins, now there's keto, yada yada. Every so many years there's a new form of some old diet is basically with a new name.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I'm not the, sorry.
And it's because they don't teach you anything else outside of the fact that here's how you diet. You just keep repeating the cycle.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, that's what diet culture is for, is that cycle.
Yeah.
But I'm not the only coach out there who's trying to change the industry for the better. I mean, there are loads and loads of coaches that I know personally here in here, if you're here in Fort McMurray, that are here in town, that are preaching similar things that I am. There is a whole other spectrum of the health and fitness industry that's really good, and we're trying to do great things and help people overcome these things and understand fat loss and understand muscle gain and understand whatever your goal is, and help you live a healthy, long lasting, sustainable lifestyle. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum tends to get a lot more.
Well, that end of the
It
spectrum,
has a lot more pull than this end of the spectrum, because
Right.
this end of the spectrum is quick.
Well, it's quick. It's a money maker for the people that develop the pills and the shakes and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. There's a lot of money in that because a lot of people have that quick fix mentality, right? I think you should probably go
Yeah, I
through
was just
there
gonna
before
say.
we just start recycling stuff.
I want to go all the way back because there's a couple of comments. Let's see. Rhonda said, I was one who always fixated on the number. On the number on the scale and the size of my clothes. With your help and coaching, you really helped me with mindset growth. I now lean more on how I feel about myself and how I feel in my clothes rather than the size of it and the number on the scale. I honestly would never have made it this far without your help. I'm forever grateful. I think the mindset is huge, and having a positive mindset ultimately allows everything else to fall into place.
That's awesome.
It is. Charlotte. Hey, Charlotte. Liz, hello. Noma, hi. I hope you're still doing well. Bezia, hello. Rhonda, yep, that was me at one point, and it was hard, but so rewarding to not be attached to that number anymore. I was weighing 3 times a day at one point, which is crazy now to look back at it and what I have learned from you.
Absolutely. I was doing the same thing at one point in time. I know for sure it was like 2 or 3 times a day. The other thing I do want to say though is that if you are using progress indicators like measurements, let's use just numbers, measurements and weight. Weighing yourself once a week on some random day of the week is not an accurate. This is another thing that comes from diet culture, Weight Watchers and all those things. And honestly, if I were to choose a diet, Weight Watchers is probably one of the better ones out there. But it focuses a lot on the scale and on having to weigh weekly and on having that number should be down every week. And your weight, one average, because for instance, if we know that it fluctuates and we understand that it fluctuates on a daily basis, you can get on the scale on Wednesday in 1 week and let's just say be 140 pounds, and then you can get on the scale on the Wednesday of the other week and be 145 because of the fluctuations, not necessarily because you gain 5 pounds of fat. So if you are going to weigh yourself and you want accurate measures, technically speaking, for accuracy, you should be weighing every day, roughly about the same time every day, recording it and taking the average for the week. The average over 7 days is your actual weight, and then you watch the trend go down. Now, just to clarify, your trend won't go down weekly all the time, nor will it always go down monthly, but it should be going down over time. Generally, when you start your journey, it'll go down a bit quicker than, the longer you've been in it, it'll take a longer time to go down. The same thing with your measurements. So measurements can increase based on PMS and bloating sometimes. So just be mindful of those things. Like everything affects, right? Like your body holds water, your body holds glycogen, your hormones change all the time throughout the month as a woman specifically. And all of that needs to be factored in. All of that needs to be taken in. So if we learn how if we get the education behind all of these things, and then we learn to be open-minded and take our emotions and detach our emotions from it, which takes a while, I'm not gonna lie, takes time to do that, then we can start to obviously not be upset when the number shoots up 2 pounds from one day to the next. And we can also learn to put our value and our worth on things that matter. We are not valued by numbers or sizes. you're valued for the person you are. You're valued for what you bring to this world. You're valued for, you know, many things that don't have anything. Nobody looks at you and knows what you weigh. Nobody can look at you and know what you weigh.
The weight guessing people at the carnivals.
Yeah. And I know that this still happens. You've probably gone to the doctor and been weighed, and then depending on what your weight is, the doctor probably says you're overweight and you need whatever. Make sure that you take the BMI chart does have a little bit of relevance depending on the person. Let me say this. But the BMI chart was never meant to measure individuals only, and the BMI chart was never meant, it doesn't take into consideration fit people, period. Like people who have muscle gain, people who are athletes, people who have muscle, people who are athletes. At 138 pounds, I think I'm considered obese on the BMI chart for my height. So, I mean, let's be logical. So, yeah, it might have some relevance for a significantly obese person who does have weight to lose. But again, you can be classified as obese and have a ton of muscle mass, and that's not being considered at all. So, again, numbers, sizes, all those things, some of it needs to be let go, and we just need to focus on being healthier overall. Looking at longevity, you know, asking ourselves and really questioning, do I feel good? And if I don't, what am I going to do about it? Is there anything I could change diet-wise? And I'm not talking like a diet. I'm talking about, you know, what I eat on a daily basis. Is there anything I could change nutritionally? Is there ways that I can incorporate more movement into my day? Even going for a 10 or 15 minute walk daily makes a huge amount of difference to your joints and how you feel and all of that stuff.
The biggest thing you said right there in that statement is, what are you going to do about it?
Well, this is true.
Because that's just it.
Well,
You can sit there and complain about the number and all that kind of stuff all day long and make all kinds of excuses for it. But if you don't develop the mindset around what are you going to do about it, then
action always speaks louder than words. The only other thing I'll end this with is, I don't know what impression you just got of me, but I'm not a mean coach. I am very much tell it like it is, no BS kind of coach. So if somebody is practicing a pattern that I notice, and that pattern goes on for, you know, they're telling themselves the same old story and they're not showing up, I will call them out, but I'm not mean about it. But I am very much a to the point kind of coach. I don't try and bullshit you with a whole bunch of things. You know, if I don't feel that that's something you need, I will tell you. If I do feel it's something you need, I would tell you. But yeah, I'm not mean. I'm just.
I can vouch for that. We're still married. So.
I'm not mean. I'm just very much to the point. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Hey.
I think so. Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. That was a topic that we've been talking about for the last couple of days now on our walks and that. Mm-hmm. About progress, lack thereof, or, you know, the fear of progress, or, you know, the joys of progress as well. There's so many different things around that people can feel around progress.
There is, and there's a significant, you know, a lot of people don't recognize this in themselves, and I didn't recognize it in myself for a while either. There was a time there a couple of years ago when my business was shifting and things were changing, and I had, you know, with my business mentors and stuff, things were going in the direction of, you know, just more success and more recognition and stuff. And when I sat down and realized it, I realized I was extremely scared of success. I was extremely scared of success, and I was trying to pull myself back from it, almost like in a self-sabotage way, because I was scared of it. And a lot of people don't recognize in themselves that they can be scared of progress as well, either, like I said, because they don't know what it means for their life if their life changes and their life suddenly looks like this. Yeah. Or they're envisioning that they have to make these huge drastic changes all at once, and then that prevents them from moving forward because they don't understand what that means. And, you know, success can also have influence on your relationships, you know, friends, family, whatever, as well as you go through, and people's opinions and etc. So some people are there's not only fear of failure, there's also fear of success. That's also a thing. Maybe we should talk about that some other time. Anyway, next week we aren't here, so there will be no live coffee time. I'll make the announcement just anyway, just to remind you all. So week after next, I don't know what date that is. I'm going to say, I believe it's the 6th. That's when we will be back with another live coffee time. Have a super great week, and thanks for joining in. If you watch the replay, let us know you watched the replay. Bye, guys.